All right, everybody. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Parks, Property and Schools Committee on Monday, May 7th at 2:30 p.m. Could we get a roll call, Janelle?
Housen,
Here?
Bordeaux, here, Roscoe, here, Laskowitz,
Here.
and Aaron's.
Here.
Okay, approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion for?
Would that be the amended?
I'm sorry,
agenda, or-
that's a very good question, actually. Let's go with, the amended agenda, correct? Or
Yeah,
not?
so just a clarification, we added a lease agreement or discuss a lease agreement for the Friends of the Ice Rink.
Yeah.
We were not able to give a 24-hour business posting, but we did give a 48-hour posting.
Mhm.
So the committee should discuss whether they feel that's appropriate to proceed with the agenda item. We did receive one letter regarding that, and let me just find it real quick.
Correspondence, you mean?
Correspondence.
Okay.
It is from Nick Devley. It says, hi Janelle, Heidi told me you were the person to write about today's parks meeting. I think the Friends of the Skate Rink should be tabled until the next meeting, as the notification was sent out in an amended agenda item over the weekend. If it is allowed to proceed, I sincerely hope the board does not agree to a check in any amount. The village is already on the hook for most of the expense to allow the skate rink to operate. Why should the taxpayers of Sister A pay for something that does not cash flow beyond basic operating expenses? I'm curious to know how many of the friends making this request reside inside of the village of Sister Bay and pay taxes to the village of Sister Bay. I would say, because we did receive a letter of concern about it,
Mhm.
we not discuss it today
Mhm.
and either have a special meeting or put it on next month's agenda. I know they are in a hurry to get going though, so I would recommend a special meeting with the appropriate notice on that.
I
Okay.
would not be in favor of
Special,
a special meeting and
Okay.
spending all of that money on one agenda item.
So if we zoomed a special meeting, and that again would be open, is the expense the same?
well, you have to, we post the agenda, we do minutes,
Yep.
we have to have staff. Set up the Zoom, so there is expense involved.
Not as much as if it were in person?
It's probably the same because you're paying for,
You do have to pay all your members, sit there, yeah.
Okay. All right, and so, otherwise it's a month from now, whatever that first Monday in May, is, right?
Right, correct.
That's my impression that we wanted to do that to be expedient. And again, I think this was also just to get feedback. I don't think it's something, so I'm inclined to not include it in today's agenda, which in a way may give them time to come back with something that's a little more fleshed out. Is that okay with everybody? Sure? Okay, need a vote on that or no?
No, what I will do though is, I will make sure that it's on next month's agenda.
Sure.
And there's actually, a lease.
Yeah, so that was, then there's time for, because at this point, it, I guess, sort of alleviates, because they would have to come back next month anyway with, right, with the lease, so, Ally?
Question, so I'm here on behalf of the ice rink, or the friends, and so if in the meantime, Julie, if there's like a lease format that you guys recommend us using, just to, again, so we can come with something as close to something you might be amenable to, and again, we were just wanting a yes, or like to gauge interest, if you would be open to leasing it.
Right.
To kind of, yeah, speed up the process. This wouldn't be in lieu of an operating agreement, it would just be like an addition to
Mhm.
something that came up in discussions, also with like the community foundation.
Sure.
Okay, so if you two
Thank
can,
you.
or one of the friends groups could get with Julie on exactly what that would need to look at for it to go in the capital, right?
Right, and then Louisa, I made a mistake. We do need a motion, to not discuss it since it is on the agenda. So
Okay,
it would be
alright.
to amend the amended agenda to remove it.
that's the motion, okay. Do I have a motion to amend the amended agenda so as not to include item, at that point would be K? Second, okay, all in favor? So moved. All right, approved, so now we move on, and do I have a motion to approve, the current Alright, I guess, agenda.
Well, you did the
Yeah,
amended one
yeah.
already, so now
So
you.
that's all we have to do?
Yeah.
Beautiful, okay. On to, all right, do I have a motion or do I have any comments or edits or anything to the agenda from March 3rd, 2025,
The minutes.
for the minutes, I mean? Anybody have any changes, edits, anything? No? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Comments, correspondence, and concerns from the public, we've heard one. Anything in writing other than that?
We have another letter. This is from Cesare. Wish I could remember his last name, from Stony Ridge Condos.
Okay,
Hello, Julie. I hope Sister Bay, with all this insane development, considering more police, more fire department, more public works, more parking, more traffic, no green space, locals will leave. There's nothing to do in Sister Bay for 8 months. What does low income contribute? It's a loophole. It's a loophole. There's not all there to contribute to Door County. I live across many and don't see them working in any of Door's towns. I can tell you people are getting price just look at Stony Ridge unit for sale now, number 31. Bought in 2012 for $120. I think he means thousand, now
Yeah.
listed for 429,000. Taxes keep going up for what? No parking, etc. I'm not explicit, but expressing what a lot of people are saying. Hope for the best. Thanks, Sarah.
so the two that we
Can-
got in writing, can we have those emailed to us at some point?
I can, we can scan those and send those to you.
Okay.
They both came after the packets went out.
I'm sorry, Denise, did you have something to say?
I just wanted to read that again later myself.
I'll send it up.
Okay, so everyone can see it, great. All right, do we have any comments, from the public gathered here today? I'm sorry, I can't see who it is. Kim,
Yeah,
how are you?
I'm here just to, express that I hope that when they tear up Maple and, Bluff Road maybe, or Parkview Drive, that they get some of the water issues fixed. We all saw over the weekend, the water coming out of the Sister Bay, hardware store.
Yeah.
Out of the street there, there's constant freezing and thawing and refreezing in the wintertime. It's a safety hazard for cars, it's a safety hazard for pedestrians. And that happens all the way down, Maple. It's the house right behind, on deck. There's a sump pump in the basement there, and they got a pipe coming out of the house. And the pipe is constantly pumping water out on the street by the administrative building. That's where that water's coming from. You can't hardly see the pipe because they covered it up with grass, so the water's coming out of the lawn there. And then you go down the hill, the logger quits have a big problem every year, spring, their basement floods. And that water's being kicked out onto their driveway and it goes out in the street. And the problem is if you have just a little thin crack in the street with this freezing and thawing weather we have in Wisconsin, contraction, expansion, contraction, they're gonna put a new road in there. As soon as there's one little fine line crack, the road's gonna break up again. And that's the problem with those roads right now. You see cracks all over down there. Right now, that water comes runs down the hill. When I first bought my house 35, I mean, this has been an ongoing problem for years and years. And I hope that with the engineers that you guys got hired, that they can look at this and there's ways to fix that. But when I first bought my house, I put drain tile around the house. The water was coming down the hill and it was running into my basement in the lower part driveway too. So I fixed it by bringing in some fill and putting it around the house and building up the driveway a little bit. And that was years ago. But right now, a lot of that water is coming down and it's running on the street. It runs it through Chad Kadanko's driveway, down his driveway out into the thing. So I'm just here to express that, hope that when you have the engineers here to redo that street, that it gets, some of that should get corrected. The other thing is I'm a little concerned about this 1-inch rock that they put on the boulevard down there, because it's all over the street down there and you get these snow plows driving over. And in a hot day, they're gonna get little bumps in the road. And then in the winter, it's freezing and thawing and you get that water built up in those little crevices and it's gonna add to the deterioration. And I have used those rocks for landscaping again, and in the past at different projects I've done, and it never really worked. And I'll tell you why, because within 2 years, you're gonna have weeds growing in there. And how do you get rid of the weeds? You do not have time to hand pick all the weeds out of there, so they're gonna come in and spray. And where's all that herbicide's gonna go? Right down into the bay. So I'm a little concerned about that when I saw them put that a 1-inch rock along the boulevard, along, Mill Street there, all along there. So you can drive down there after a meeting and see rocks in the, on the curb. Some of those rocks are already falling into the, storm sewer. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you for your consideration. I hope the engineers get the water straightened out when they redo the street, because now is the opportunity to do it. And I don't want to have to come back here in 2 years after the new street's there and tell you it's breaking up already.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Item 5A, concession building restrooms, review design and approve for bid.
Okay, so in your,
We didn't do that, right?
yeah, in your packet, you did receive, the most recent plan we had at that, by the time the packet went out. I did just hand out to you, a packet that we received, or sort of revised runs we received on the 5th. Basically, they're the same as far as size. It's just that these have more of the engineering in them. They're gonna add Skylar's or Stantec's civil work to it, but then this set is ready to go out for bid. McMahon, you know, they were only gonna do the design, but they did want to make sure it was done right, so they did add the engineering, and they are going to put it out for bid, which means they're doing the construction service, part of those construction services. Just to help us out. We're not paying them any extra, they're just gonna do it to help us out. So we want you to focus on, is this, you know, the size, number of stalls, is that what you had in mind? Because we were trying to get this one, this is when we were trying to get bid and put out, to get some development during summer if we possibly could.
Should we not have had a conversation earlier on how many stalls we were looking at?
I thought we did.
We did, yeah.
Was that the meeting I missed then?
Could have been,
I'm not sure, Denise.
All right.
yeah, because we talked about 2.
The one thing that's on here that we did not talk about is the water fountains.
Yeah, I was wondering about the bubblers.
Yeah,
So
so,
seasonal then, I guess, or is the whole, I thought that some of it was year round or no, there's none of it.
That's my question too. We keep building bathrooms that you cannot use in the winter. And I wanted to know if these are gonna have, doesn't mean that we have to keep them open year round, but do we have the ability?
Yeah, to avoid the
We want to.
waterfront park situation where we couldn't even if we wanted.
Right.
Well, the other ones at the sports complex that are currently there are year round.
yeah, so these are permanent, so they would be accessible year round.
Right.
We're installing the lateral to make sure it's deep enough to make sure nothing freezes. So this is meant to sort
Those
of,
water fountains, I guess, Eric would have to turn them off in the winter. Or
I think we have been shutting them off because we're concerned about them freezing. Eric, have you been taking them down? I know we did
shut
the
the
first
ones
year.
off out on Warming House. We also turned the water off to that concession stand because it's not insulated, doesn't have a heat source in it as well, so I'm not. Are they running heaters into that bathroom for them to stay on year round? Because right now that building does not have any insulation or heat in it. And that would have to take some engineering to, because the water will run into that concession into a non-heated area. And that would have to flow into that bathroom, which would, if there would be heat in there, so that would be a little tricky. So right now, my understanding is that those are seasonal, since the base concession is a seasonal operation.
Right, I thought though the addition was being built to be used year round. I'm just trying to look on the plans here real quick.
Yeah, I mean, meaning the restrooms year round and at
Correct.
some point. And I mean, it's an outdoor, facility. Other than in terms of, entertainment or having parties or, anything like that.
There's no HVAC and I don't see electrical to the walls for electric heat. So I don't think they're heated.
Well, and they're not doing, they were doing enough of the plan to get us out to bid. So they're not. Let me see what he has in here.
I mean, if there's not heat in there now, I don't know that you could do it very easily.
Mhm.
Or it would be,
It would take some engineering to get that to work correctly. Shutting off one section of the building to leave that other section on.
I'm just really not interested in building more seasonal bathrooms.
So Eric, if it's not heated, then we'd have to. We gotta turn the water off and close them.
Correct, it gets shut down, at the end of the season, at the beginning of November.
So there's
We
more
need to get the
expense
water
to having
shut
it
down
and,
there.
or it's really hard and almost impossible to get heat to a building. that's
Yeah,
not
the
heated.
original structure wasn't set up for winter conditions.
Yeah. Having said that, most of the use there is,
I mean, why
Spring,
can't we have
summer,
a
fall.
separate line?
the separate line, I don't know. what you-
A separate water,
Oh, so it has dedicated water routed in such a way that it's not seasonal. What's about the, I can see where. Ties into the existing.
You know, it may not, when I think about it, it may not be because keep in mind our budget was so low.
and I don't think we were specific about that.
We didn't, we weren't specific, we didn't talk about,
No.
I thought it was year round, but I'm looking at this and I'm like, I'm not seeing anything that, I see insulation,
Mhm.
which we don't have in the one down by Waterfront Park, so that is nice, at least we have. Hopefully it'll be be able to stay open a little longer than the one down in Waterfront Park. But there's not a heater or anything on here or in here.
These are right by the baseball park, the ones that are near where the existing ice rink is, they are heated. And
Correct.
are
Yeah.
open in the winter time.
Yeah, they're
Is
open
there
in the winter,
something else
'cause
that's
we're
gonna
skating,
change,
yeah.
that's gonna make this more likely to be used in the winter time?
There's not much that goes on down there in the winter time.
Probably
I
about-
don't know about
I just
future expansion, when things get redone, if that'll open up more possibilities, but as it currently is right now, there's not a whole lot that happens down at that facility.
I just don't know what the future brings. I mean, it took us how many years to get bathrooms down here? I don't know what's gonna be going on in 20 years, what that sports complex will look like, what kind of activities there will be, what kind of more climate change there will be if we'll have, 50-degree Decembers.
So we either move forward with no heat. And they're usable for 9 months out of the year, 8 months out of the year, whenever you drain them in probably October.
Correct.
So just one other question, Eric. Is there anywhere in the village where we leave outdoor water fountains on for drinking?
No, we shut them all
I mean, I'm not sure too many people anywhere turn on outdoor water drinking fountains in the winter time in Wisconsin.
They make them where you can use them year round, but most people turn the water off. You can buy them, but I don't know if anybody wants to test that.
off. We have 3 different sites and we shut them all.
Right, I know, yeah.
I think that first year you were here, Eric, we actually took it off the wall, didn't we, in winter?
We still do take it off the wall in the village hall. That's removable. We built it like that.
Well, then I would say, because it sounds like the idea of heating it is expensive and I mean, really considering that something else different might happen there around these restrooms that will be there, where we might enclose, the only thing that would happen that would be different if we enclose it and heat it. Well, then we heat, the bathrooms. But the location for a larger community building or something like that, initially anyway, was at the site where the warming house is now. That could all change, I don't know, but for now, I think we need to move forward without heat.
Even without the heater, at least this one is insulated, so if they do come through that back wall at a later date with something, at least the building itself will be insulated, so we will have it in a better condition than we do the waterfront park restroom. Because waterfront park, we can't do anything to because of the way it was designed and built.
I don't know if all the electrical drawings are in here, but if it's insulated and you have either access to 220 in each of those bathrooms, or you could add 220 because it's already at the building, you could add electric heat in the future. Not a big deal. But that doesn't fix the outdoor water fountain issue. That,
Oh, I don't care about the water fountain.
oh, I'm sorry, I thought that's what you
She
were
meant
talking
year,
about.
no, I think Denise meant year-round
I think,
bathrooms. 'Cause we have
if
to
these are
close these.
insulated, they'd probably use electric heat in here anyway if they ended up doing it.
The main issue is to get the water there, because the water is probably gonna be supplied through the current building.
Oh, it's not coming through the floor?
I'm not sure how.
Or then, so is the new lateral just septic drain, the water line's not coming through in that same place?
Right. The water is already supplied to that concession.
I see.
Through an existing lateral.
Okay, so you have to heat wherever that water's coming in from.
Correct.
That I have no idea.
To Denise's point, it would probably take another lateral coming down.
So do I have a motion, to go forward without heat or discussion?
Just one question, so even if they're insulated, we're still gonna get water there, correct?
We could get water there if we ran another lateral from the warming house.
Okay.
If it's insulated and we installed heaters, then we'd have to pursue a plan to run another water lateral, a separate water lateral to those bathrooms. Because right now, the existing lateral that runs to that concession stand is not heated, that building is not heated. And more than likely, they're just gonna run a water line through that existing building into those bathrooms.
Running down from the warming house right now, in the ground, not deep enough. Your concern is where it comes out of the ground into the
Currently,
concession.
I'm not sure how deep that lateral was dug in. It's, the concession isn't insulated at all and has no heat. So that building, come November, it gets, the water line gets completely shut off inside the warming room. And then a compressor is hooked up to that line, then blowing out the water heater and the existing line.
So the water comes into this area called mercantile occupancy on the drawing here. So it probably comes under the water, under the ground and comes up in there. And there's no heat in there, so there's no heat in the center of the existing building. So it's probably more than 4 feet deep underneath the building and hopefully all the way to its source, which means that's okay.
Yeah, that's what I
So-
was
so
asking,
what you'd
because
have-
if we could tee it before the building, one to the bathroom and then a line.
That
goes
would
to the
be-
building
That would be one option, or depending upon how the line, I'm sorry, I'm even saying this, but depending upon how the line is, the other thing I've seen done is they box it in and heat it.
No, just the.
Yeah.
line, so.
So I mean, Denise, to your point, it wouldn't be impossible to do it in the future, but it'd be a little tricky. If we approve this the way it is, otherwise, yeah, you gotta make a change.
Yeah.
So it's tricky if we do it now, tricky if we do it later.
Yeah. I think so.
And right now, I don't think we've got the funding to be tricky. How much was the grant?
75.
I mean, could we approve it and then go back to McMahon and just ask them to check it out?
What, to give us a bid?
Or are they, yeah. Well, the first thing I would do is just make sure we're right about, because it's not in the drawing, but I'm sure Eric knows because I know where you're talking, where those sinks are. Is that where the shut off valve is? Yeah.
All that area is being ripped up for the sewer lateral, so it may be easy to. No plumber.
Always easier for somebody else.
All you need is money, it's so easy. So that's the thing.
But we still do have a need for restrooms there
We do.
for during the season, which
Yeah,
is why.
we
this
will
got
be
the
without
raise.
restrooms for 5 months. Right, close them in October, November, open them in April, May.
They usually get shut down after Fall Fest.
Okay. So they'd have to go up the hill and use the restrooms at the warming center, or the warming house.
Correct.
Which is what they do now.
What they do now,
But we do have a grant to cover most of the costs.
75 grand.
Maybe we could potentially approve it today and investigate options, because the other option would be to cut up that floor rather than go from the outside. And that's all concrete. I mean, it's again, easier for me to say.
Well, has Mike thought about that at all? We don't know because, I mean, it's not in the plans, but maybe in his mind that's part of it.
You know, I know I never talked with Mike about that. I know it was, we wanted we wanted men's room, women's room. We talked about the number of stalls. He actually added that water fountain to it. He's like, no, you need this. And you can't just have one. You actually have to have that ADA compliant one too
The
now.
lower one, yeah.
We didn't talk, I know he was insulating things. I know some of the pipes are insulated. We didn't talk about heater. I'm guessing because that building's not heated, he probably just didn't even look at that.
Right.
Julie,
And I didn't ask for it.
are these dotted lines fire suppression?
Where are you at, Mike?
I'm looking at the floor, this drawing. Are those dotted lines fire suppression?
It looks like it says light with
Oh,
egress lighting.
okay.
Okay, so we either approve this or we approve it under the condition that we go back and ask him to bid heating part. He comes back to us, tells us how much it is, and then we've got to find the money, so.
Well, it's not just the heating part, it's the routing of the water too.
Well, yeah. So,
I'm sorry, it says right here, unheated building. On page A011.
oh, the front page, yep. Seasonal building. Well, we told him it was a baseball, it's typically a baseball facility.
So Julie, Nora, these plans that you distributed, what's gonna be left for the bins? So they already went ahead and did it, or do you still need a motion?
We would
To
need a
accept it.
motion, so he's still, the things he's adding to the final set yet was. He had talked to Eric about paper towel dispensers, soap dispensers, garbage, mirrors, veranda fixtures. He's trying to get the village to have standard stuff, cause he's like. Whatever we're using in the other buildings, we should try and use here, we should have some consistency, so. You're not working with several different vendors for your paper towels. You can buy one paper towel that fits all your dispensers, or when you repair, they're
That
all the
makes sense.
same.
Yeah.
So he's just, and Eric was getting back to him on that. He just wrote that on Saturday. And then once he has that, he's gonna finish up the plan set and then they were gonna put it out for bid for us.
Okay, so how does it sound then, if you're gonna do a motion, if it's something like this? That the Parks, Property and Streets Committee gratefully accepts the offer from the employees at McMahon and Associates to create engineering drawings and specifications for the restroom addition to the baseball field concession building to be constructed at the sports complex, so that project can be let for bids in as timely a fashion as possible. Okay,
Well, the only thing if the only thing would be, we could do that, but then add, we'd also like, an option to put in a water lateral directly to the washroom, so in the future you could heat the bathrooms and have water access.
okay,
I
so
think that's what I heard Denise ask.
Is that a typical thing that you can bid it like this, but that we also wanna know the option and they give us both, or do you have to just?
That's a
bid
good
for one?
question, Jerry.
when you put something up for bid, you can do options. Probably is they're gonna have to go back and change the plans and, which they can. You know, it just delays it, cause they'll have to change those plans and then either come back here or just trust them to send them out for bid after that.
or you could do a motion to that be investigated, right, Julie? That the project, the possibility of doing that in the future. And then come back to the committee. Then you wouldn't have to change his plans.
Yeah, I mean, I can ask Mike, what would it take to have the infrastructure such that he can be added to the building in the future? Is there something he can do to that effect right now?
Heat and water. Right? Heat and
Well,
water.
there is water,
We turn it off,
but we're shutting off, yeah.
and there's no heat.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike, yeah, you're saying year round, or, yeah.
Right, because I don't know that year round we need to heat the storage or the place where they hand out the hot dogs. Unless it's because that isn't enclosed, right?
Correct, the part where the people sit under the pavilion there, that's all open.
Yeah, and then this end is open, or are those temporary doors on there? I can't remember. Where you get your hot dog and your beer.
Those are probably, the concession
closed.
piece of it could be closed, yeah.
Okay.
And so he still plans on, nothing's changed with the epoxy floor, correct?
Correct.
'Cause I'm tired of
Yep.
the village putting in tile with grout that nobody can get clean. It looks terrible. It's difficult to clean.
Yeah, he even sent us a little, I think that might be in here too, I think you put it in here, he sent us a little cross section to show how that would be and how it would go up the wall to make sure the wall was protected.
Great, that's easier. Okay, do we have a motion? Well, want to
Reread it.
Janelle to reread it, or are we good?
Can you read what addition you made to it after you last read?
Okay. And that an alternate option of including heat and water so that the building will be winterized shall be added.
Should we just say the bathroom, not the whole
Yeah.
building?
we'll just-
Okay. Alternate option to include for heat and water for the restrooms. So that portion of the building to be accessible year round. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think so.
And so you want to say an alternate pricing option?
I think we should ask Mike, and if Mike's like, Julie, that's gonna cost you over $100,000. Then I think we say, okay, well, let's just go with it as.
Right.
Okay, how about if you do two motions then? That would be cleaner. Because then you could say that Mike shall be asked to investigate the cost and report it to you, and if you feel it's feasible to come back to the
Can we come
committee.
back again? Yeah.
Okay. So who wants to make that second motion? Lily is, and then
We have a second for Lily. Lily's motion.
Second.
All in favor?
I
Okay.
Opposed.
Denise, just real quick on A211.
I should clarify that. I must have missed the meeting when there was discussion. So I'm disappointed that it's not heated. Thank you for listening and at least asking Mike about that, but I also think that, the bathrooms are too small.
Just a note to real quick to answer your question on the floor, Denise, I do see the note in here. He did put it in here. It's epoxy non-slip finish.
Well, good.
Yeah, and it says verify existing conditions prior to construction on some of the elevation drawings, so I cannot find anything that shows existing plumbing, but I'm sure Eric knows where it is.
Okay, on to item 5B, Mill Road closure request, Peninsula Century Fall Challenge Bike Ride. Ben?
Fitzgerald, I'm here on behalf of the Century Fall Challenge. This is the same approval that we brought forward in August of 24. And we're requesting its approval for September 13th of 25. Thank you.
Any questions for Ben? Do I have a motion? To approve?
So moved.
Second?
Question.
Sure.
They have a letter in here that they state that they're sending out, but it says, dear business owner. There's a lot of people that live there. Also, do you send them to the residents?
Yeah, anyone who's affected, you can go ahead and change that.
Okay.
Yeah, they should just say property owner.
Yeah.
Yeah, good call. Thanks, Ben. Okay, I'm sorry, did we have a second? I didn't.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thanks. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Okay, item 5C, waterfront park concession proposal, e-bike rental proposal by Robert Geithner.
Okay, so for this one, we need a motion, to reconsider it and then discuss it. So
Okay.
at the last meeting, we reviewed a contract for the kayak, which is just Mr. Geithner's company. And we back to the board awarded it. You can reconsider that at the meeting. So what he wants to do now is he talked to Louise and he wants to have these overnight. He wants to have e-bikes, that e-bike storage shed, everything he proposed is in the packet. Because we already finished all the conversation on that, we can reconsider it at this meeting. And if you're willing to do that, then we'll discuss it.
Should it be a separate contract that would be rolled into the existing? Is that why it needs to reconsider?
So there's two ways of looking at this. One is the RFP period is done, it's closed, we don't accept any. So this is just too late at this.
But we asked
Yeah.
him,
But
We
the
asked them to
committee
talk
asked
about
him.
e-bikes
Yeah.
last time. to bring it
Yeah.
back.
It was in the minutes we just approved, right?
So, but because we already approved a contract and the board approved the contract, what we do is we look at it more as a reconsideration. We can do that at this meeting, since it's the subsequent meeting.
We need a motion to reconsider? Or Can we just go right into this?
You can have, no, you need the motion.
Okay. We have a
Reconsider the
motion to
prior months.
reconsider the prior month's agenda item regarding the e-bike proposal by Robert Geithner.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then now you would just discuss it like it's.
Okay.
new.
All right, so I think, Bob, are you on the call?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Rob, we can hear you, sorry. All right, so e-bike rental proposal, and we have what you sent in from the packet. Julie, do you have anything that you wanted to?
No, it just was in the, there's a staff report, just some questions, that we, after we hear more about the proposal, some questions I had, where's the electrical coming from, who's paying for it? Information about the building, because we do have an architectural review, we have setbacks, we have to meet. And just something for the Parks Committee is, do you want to notify the yacht club and have them weigh in or be aware of it, because it is pretty close to their lot,
Where they're suggesting.
depending what they, where. it
Well,
goes.
as
Right.
long as they meet the setback, I'm not too concerned about that.
And
Yeah,
what is
the
it there?
setbacks are set up to
15?
avoid interfering with the neighbors precisely.
So Rob, you want to give us an overview?
Yeah. As we discussed last month, basically we mentioned that if you had any interest in having e-bikes down on the that area to do a test run for 1 year. All we would need is covered storage because they have batteries and an electrical outlet at some point, because we do utilize one to charge our iPad down there, and it would what you have is more than enough to charge our little batteries. They last for 40 miles on a charge, and I have at our shop in Jacksonport, I have 9 plugged into one outlet and don't have a problem. They don't draw too much. I'm not sure if we'd have to pay you guys, if there would be an excessive use of power. I'm not sure. Aesthetically, I sent a picture along, just a shed style roof that was clean, very neutral. So, no bright colors, nothing to draw too much attention to. The point of storage was along that path. And I know Luis had mentioned there were some vegetation concerns. We could explore any area down there that you guys would consider for a location for a non-permanent structure built just 4x4 posts. Like I said, the shed style roof would be stained a darker color so that it kind of blends in. And we would just simply run, we just have a cable that we'd run underneath through the bikes to cable it in overnight. Because like our kayaks, sometimes folks have been imbibing throughout the evening and take them out freely. So we do lock things up. Like I said, this was a fluid process in the sense where we weren't really set on anything other than, I know I heard potentially moving the location to another spot. The only reason we were hoping to be relatively close to our kayak launch point there was because it is expensive to maintain staff. And our insurance policy that we have listed is the Mill Road spot. So we do have quite an extensive insurance policy for that location. So if it were to move, if that would be better for the town, we'd probably have to reconsider some pricing, simply because that would be a little more expensive to get another location covered in policy. And like I said, this year was 4 e-bikes. We wanted to get on this month just in case, because it does take a bit of time to, it's about 4 weeks to get the bikes, but potentially, since the company's an American company, but I assume it's manufactured out of the country, so it would probably price us out if they were taxed, or these tariffs went into place. That might make the price point not that savvy. So anyway, we thought we would discuss that with you guys and what you would think. What we foresaw, like I said, was 4 e-bikes. That means we probably maintain 8 bike helmets out there. Smalls, medium, large, extra large, because we do require, we do e-bike rentals in Jacksonport. Our insurance requires that we let folks know that as soon as they hop on a bike, they need to be required to keep that helmet on, as well as wherever they park their bike, you can't just leave it in like a regular bike on a beach or anything. So we provide maps, and we provide routes to where people can go. And we do intervals of an hour rental. Our prices are very reasonable, I believe, based on the equipment expense. But again, this is all open to interpretation. If you guys are interested in that in the town, we do have some interesting areas that folks could commute to safely. But like I said, most of our rentals are 45 minutes to max 2 hours. We could do day rentals, but I thought 4 bikes would probably be where we'd be comfortable starting with, as I'd say 90% of our kayak rentals and family rentals down on the beach are families of 4 or less. So we figured that would be,
So you have power at the existing location? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, about, I think 20 years ago, someone dug for Rick Wiley little extension cord down there. So we used to actually have telephone, I believe, at one point years ago. But yeah, we had an electrical cable that just a regular extension cord that charges. The only thing we had charging was an iPad. So
We're gonna have to look into that, because if that's being run by like an extension cord, that wouldn't meet state code, so we'd have to look at that
Okay,
Closest box, I think you told me the closest box is the one that's, a little bit up,
by the
short walk.
flagpole, I thought, or something.
When you, if you guys are looking at the photo, there, what looks like a flagpole there, it's not, but it's a flagpole, that's where it is. When I walked this a couple of times over the last couple of days, and where the suggested the storage box be, that is I don't know the name of the bush, but it's large. And so I don't think there's room to like put it into that space in order to keep it off of the pavers.
I'm not sure it would meet the setback either, because it's in the,
Right, right.
for a storage shed, like.
Yeah,
50
So-
feet or-
it's possible. I mean, could you or would we be interested in having them put it on the beach? Behind, where their kiosk, or like their tent is, the kiosk is that they use for the rentals on the beach? Okay, if you look at the,
No, I know what you're saying.
you know where the rubble mound is?
Thank you.
Okay, so
The only concern
behind,
would be people riding the e-bikes up and down the beach. I think we want them to take them.
well, this is manned. I mean, this is staffed, so they would. Well, I'm putting words in your mouth, but if you were to move it closer to where you're renting the kayaks, clearly you would have to have them or help them, get the bike up on a paved path.
Yeah, I mean, either way, not to discredit tourists, but we really have to spend some time talking with them. I know folks have floated the idea of just like a check-in, check-out on their own, but just for safety reasons, we really have to default to our lowest guest, whether it's kayaking and e-bike, especially because, folks just hop on them like a regular bike. So we would plan on, if we use that path, we'd get them back out to the parking lot, because in Jacksonport, we are one of two e-bike companies. The other e-bike company puts out about 6 to 10 times as much as us, and they have had a lot of complaints with people on the beach, and that's because they don't take the time to communicate clearly with what they're legally allowed to do. So we do spend time, and that's why if there was anywhere along that stretch of beach up, even if it had to be 20 or 30 yards away, that wouldn't be a problem. We would just probably make sure that we have extra staff on, because we can't launch kayaks and bikes at the same time if we only have one person. But like I said, just as long as we could walk to where those bikes are, to unclamp them, get them to a safe point where they can take them out, because it is trending right now, these e-bikes. And folks love doing it, but like I said, we're very hands-on. Peninsula Kayak Company is with our guests, because we've seen other companies fail, and I don't personally like getting that much flack. So whatever would be successful for you guys, in the sense of aesthetics, location, we're really we're open to having that conversation. But like I said, I was just trying to get this out there in case this was something you were interested in, and then we would probably have to put our order in for bikes relatively soon.
Yeah, so from an electricity usage standpoint, just reading online, backs up what he's saying, that it's half the 1 kilowatt hour for a full charge. So at our rates, it's like
That's
7 to 9 cents, and we're getting 10% of the rental, so it'd be a drop in the bucket.
Right.
I think, in my opinion, as long as they can build the storage shed in a way that meets our zoning codes, and the electricity is up to code for where they're getting it from, I don't have concerns.
So Julie, from a setback perspective, if they were down on the beach, close to where they, or adjacent to whatever, where they're doing, the kayak rentals, where would it need to be placed?
I don't think the DNR would allow it on the beach.
Okay. But where else would
And
there,
then, so once you go back from the high water mark inland,
Yeah.
it would have to be 50
Okay.
feet back.
so on this map, where?
So you have to go, like, let's say this is the line, the rock, you'd have to be 50 feet back.
Okay,
And
and
I-
this is all vegetation right here.
Yeah, and I don't know offhand what that setback is between there and the yacht club. I'd have to look at the code. Because when you butt up to a different zoning district, you have to take the more restrictive of the setback. I don't know what that is offhand.
So I think what you're saying Because when you're looking at the map, it would be to the right of the red square that's on there now, the other side of that walkway closer to that evergreen.
I believe so.
So there is a required setback for temporary structures too. Is my understanding with just the Jackson Port, ours was basically almost like a pergola was where it kind of fell under because it was movable. And like I said, nothing would be sunk in the ground in the sense concrete, or there would be nothing screwed in, to pads or anything. It would an entirely movable structure because like our little tiki launch that we have, basically it's just our tent on a box, so it is movable. So that's, I think, why we skirt those rules. But
Yeah, we have temporary uses and temporary structures. I don't know them off the top of my head, so I'd have to look at that.
So there may not be a setback, or we don't know.
Well, we have a setback for anything over 6 inches in height, and it's 50.
Okay, it's 50 feet. So Rob, you're looking at 50 feet.
okay,
You can't to the beach. I think you won't make setback, it won't meet setbacks with the current location. Doesn't mean we can't figure this out, but again, it's committee needs to
We just
discuss
have to-
this.
If we require that just the zoning be followed, then
Mhm.
those details can be worked
They can't be.
out.
And we do have a walking tour coming up too that we can look at.
That's true, yeah. Well, when do you have to place these orders? Are you worried about tariffs, or when do you have to place orders for these things?
well, the bikes are $1,200, and my friend works at Trek, and they were facing something along a 44% increase in their prices. So again, it's not the end of the world, but I would be interested to see, based on, I assume the assembly and the batteries are definitely made overseas. That could potentially put, an order of 4 bikes instead of a little less than $5,000, pushing them definitely in the $6,500 range. And it's not the end of the world. We'd be fine if you guys in a few weeks we could wait it out. And if we ordered them anyway, which we may just order just to have them in stock, we just didn't. For our insurance policy, we outlined every single boat we have, our inland marine policy as well. So we have a blanket about I think a $1 million coverage for Sister Bay Beach alone. But that doesn't include e-bikes. So before we wrap up our policy and pay for it and then have an addendum to said policy, if we had that listed within the policy, it would save us a bit of money. I was talking to our insurance agent this morning. So just an idea if this was going to potentially be successful, just to know that, yeah, we have to move it somewhere. And that's not to say as well, if the location's a little further away, we have no problem, I guess, if our guides would just move the bikes down to where our rentals are for kayaks in the morning and just kickstand them, next to, if you go down the path before it turns, we have our paddle boats there. We could always just put the bikes down there and just bring them back every morning, and bring them. So, and they're really good looking bikes, so we keep our equipment good and clean. So, and we wouldn't obstruct the path ever. So that's another thing we're well aware of, so.
Denise had a question.
I'm sorry, Denise.
In the zoning code, in the parks zoning district, it says accessory buildings shall meet the same setbacks as principal buildings in the district. Other accessory building requirements are listed in 660501. And so for a principal structure, it talks about the side setback is 50 feet, rear is 50 feet for principal buildings, and it says accessory buildings. Now, this is not permanent. But there's kind of, it's 3 pages. No, actually, it's only 1 page, the whole in the zoning code,
The accessory.
the park district. That's it. I mean, there's not a lot
Yeah, in the
here,
beginning-
so I should go to 660501.
And then in the beginning, it talks about the temporary uses and temporary structures, so. I think, if the committee's inclined to do it, why don't, you could approve it pending compliance with the zoning code and electrical, being compliant with the state code.
Of access, in terms of accessing the power. Okay,
Right, yeah.
okay. I'm fine with that. It means that we are gonna do a walk around, but I think that your timing might be a little bit more sensitive than when we're planning our walk around, which won't be till May, Rob. But it would mean.
That would be actually, if you guys are seriously considering it, I think ordering the bikes would be okay. I would just probably have to wait, to start building the little structure. Clear idea where it's gonna be, because if it's gonna be closer to the beach, it was kind of uneven down there, so if it's gonna be closer to the parking lot's flat, I'll just build it according.
Okay. One thing that Rob alluded to, because Dave Leno called me today and said that, the marina would love to have his seasonal the boaters would love to have access to more e-bikes. However, that what Rob's point was that, because he thought it was self-serve and then they aren't. And so for Rob to have two locations, or if that is the only location, it still needs separate staff. And you gotta have at least one person there, right, Rob? To make sure somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess, like I said,
I
it would
understand.
depend.
You alluded to it. I wanted the committee to understand what you were talking about.
Yeah, like I said, we're not here to, talk really highly of ourselves, but we really never rent any equipment, even a paddle, without having a waiver signed, as well as engaging with the renter to ensure that they are painfully aware of the safety situations of paddling on Lake Michigan or biking around our county. So we would require staff to at least check the bikes out.
Especially as far away as that would be. Anyway, because David had expressed an interest, and I invited him on, but I'm not sure if he's on or not, but basically that's what he said. Because his voters would love that, just to kind of tool around and.
Yeah, and they're fantastic. They have little baskets that we were going to order for if that was the case, that people, because they're always going to grab groceries or something. So that could be something we work into consideration as well. Maybe we talk to him, I guess,
It's not a bad idea, or for future or something, because they don't have any car. They don't have a car.
So
Yeah.
back to the specific agenda topic.
Back to the topic, yes.
I move that we approve as written with the caveat that electrical comply with state code and the temporary structure comply with our zoning.
Would that also include the 10%?
That I think we talked about as the standard for all.
Do you hear the 10%?
Yep, that's completely understandable. It'll be in the same, actually, we use same iPad for the same charging, so it'll be the same report. We just will itemize between the difference of voting and biking, so you can have an idea at the end of the year what they were, and then we'll cut a clean 10%. So.
Could you also, this would go for kayaks as well. I know that you report revenue. Do you take counts of the number of people?
Yeah, and actually I submitted reports last 2 years of itemized every rental day of what we had. So.
Number of revenue, but you had number of people as well?
Yeah, I do have that information, so.
Okay, I'm just curious about that. And if you do, when you do the bikes, I'd be curious about not just the revenue, but the people. Okay.
Yeah, and if there were anything that you all were thinking and there was questions, complaints, or recommendations, we'd love to hear it. We actually used to open a little earlier, but Ephraim is kind of the early person's paddling rental. And 2 years ago, we switched from opening at really early in the morning to an hour back. And we only had 4 days of renters before that period of time over the entire summer. So we are open to anything that you guys, like I said, any recommendations you have for us. But like I said, we can get that report of all of our users to you guys next week. So.
All right, are you good with that motion? Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There's not a lot in there, Julie.
There's not.
No.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it.
Okay, next up is 5D Historic Signage Program.
So the Historic Society, they did come up with some draft language for some signs, and we just want to look at them, see if they're on the right track. Is this kind of what we're looking for? you know, we still have to discuss how the signs get displayed, but they did put together some information, little bit, some of them, it's quite a bit to go on a sign, but we had also talked about doing that, you know, code to send people back to a website. But I did send you what we have received, and John, you could, do you guys want to maybe explain this a little further, where you're going or what you're thinking?
John or Terry?
So just to back up a little bit, the content that we supplied that's in the packet was in response to Julie's suggestion that there might be plaques placed at individual sites that have historic significance. So the content that we sent obviously could be modified, could be shortened. The intent is to have a mix of words and pictures, if possible, QR codes maybe. But I think beyond that concept, the question might be whether or not plaques at individual sites is the preferred way to go. There are a couple of other alternatives. One, if you think about what's in Bailey's Harbor, they have, many of you know this, there are signs that are sort of low to the ground, and a series of 6 or 7 plaques, not bronze type plaques, but more of a wood-like finish, I guess I'll say. And these are placed in various sites along the street mainway in Bailey's Harbor. So what I was thinking about, similar to that, is that number one, that would seem to be impractical for Sister Bay because of the traffic, foot traffic, and events like Fall Fest. That could be a hazard, I think. So if there were instead signs at waist level, you know, tilted up like this, and then also thought beyond having signs at like that along 42, maybe another thought would be to think about having a sign like that, again, say, you know, the size of two desktops along the waterfront, not obscuring the view, but placed so that people could be looking out at the waterfront, but looking at a panel of signs like that, that would display the history of Sister Bay, kind of all in one place. There's a little bit of that today with the coastal byways sign by the restrooms, but that's not quite the same. This would be more genuine historic type information. So that's another alternative, I think, to having bronzed plaques at specific particular sites. What I just described, I think, would be viewed by more people, would be more accessible, and more folks, I think, would look at it. So I throw that out, and the cost for this is obviously something you all would need to be talking about, because it's the concept here is that the Historical Society would support the content development, where the village would be providing the funding for those signs, whatever form they might take. So I'll leave it at that for a moment.
Have you looked at any kind of, is there any granting that, because for your type of an organization for signage like this in this situation?
Haven't looked into it, quite possibly, but haven't looked into it, because I think the theory was, and Julie, correct me if this doesn't sound right, but that there was a potential funding source with tourism dollars that might help support this.
I'm just wondered if, I just wanted to throw that out for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, originally we had talked about using those municipal reimbursement funds.
Right.
And then, and the committee had looked at different types of signage. You know, I remember one of them was a plate on a rock, a sign on a rock, a grave sign on a rock, and some other ones. I think, you know, when we were talking a while ago, you know, the thought was, how much do we want on that sign? Because that dictates what type of sign you should have or which direction you should go. If you're having a lot of text, an engraved sign probably isn't gonna work.
I think our model for that, and I agree with, keep the text down, include lots of graphics and pictures. So that's all doable. I wouldn't dwell too much on the specific content I sent you. It can easily be modified. I think the bigger question is, what kind of sign arrangement you really want to have? Plaques at individual sites or something more generally accessible?
Generally accessible, meaning like they're all in, like, they're in various locations in Bailey's Harbor, but there's usually a cluster of them, like there's one in front of the blacksmith shop. And so it shows a photo of August, Zahn, and then talks a little bit about that. Then there's another location where there maybe 4 or 5 or something like that. Is
I
that
mean,
what
we collaboratively could do that. And we could create content going up and down the main stretch of Bay Shore.
I'm not suggesting
that's-
Bayshore, I'm just talking about that kind of
Yeah.
style.
But as a starting point, I guess I'm just thinking that that concept of a sign like this at the waterfront might be a way to have something viewed by a lot of people along the walkway down there. The other sort of example of this is the signage at Newport State Park at Lot 3, also by the beach. It's more of an upright sign, but the designs are similar. Modest content, lots of pictures, and a view looking out to the water.
So an example of what I'm thinking when you say that is if you go to Pearl Harbor, they're about waist high, they're high enough so that you can see them in a wheelchair or be standing.
Yes.
They're facing the memorial and it's a short walk. There's maybe 3 of them.
Yeah.
Tell 3 parts of the story.
They're usually in color. Have like a hard, clear surface on them, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
I think I'm liking that idea better than the brass. Having colorful photos, the QR code to give more information. I very much like the idea of having a larger one someplace down at the waterfront and, whether we have a map of Sister Bay and the harbor, and then, you could have the QR codes that, okay, this is what, the lumber yard, where it used to be. And if you zero in on that QR code, a picture would come up and show that, or things like that. I think that would really be incredible. I think that's a really great idea. And I also think that, it could work on individual businesses also, something that had some photos, but still with the QR code instead of just a brass plaque that kind of just fades into the architecture of the building, or people, nothing grabs their attention and it doesn't stand out.
If the Historic Society is doing the Boathouse Museum or the museum at the boathouse, right in that area, there might be a good location for some of that too.
Yeah.
The idea is actually scalable, what Terry was talking about, if we have a larger sign at the marina that could basically show the whole waterfront area with certain numbers on them, and then a smaller version of that at the actual site. And you could take your QR code and you could literally do a walking tour based on the overall. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities with this that would engage people in this whole process.
Yeah.
So are we giving you a good idea of the road to go down in terms of continue? Because I think you were looking for feedback from us on how we might want these.
Yeah, it's really
Sure,
up,
right?
it's really up to us, and then they're gonna work with us on how to make that happen and what the story says and what the photos are on there. So if we're looking at maybe one longer, larger one that tells a story, then that's what we can work on. Versus individual ones at each site, like we had talked about
And that
previously.
could be, just the first step. There could be, if that works, then, we could do other, things along the row, of businesses as well.
Yeah, because we had that original list of the areas we wanted to highlight, right, the locations, which we
Right.
can always get back to.
Right,
But as a starting point, do we want to work on that? I guess I would call a waterfront diorama kind of.
Well, I think we should have two larger ones, and I know that they're not that, the marina is not that far away. From the boathouse or the village hall, but. I don't know that 100% of the people go to both.
Maybe at Marina Park?
Well, I'm just saying, if you,
Marina
it
Park,
could
no,
be
they
a little
definitely
bit
don't.
the same, but a little bit different if you had one of the larger boards someplace at the marina for people who are in Marina Park or have a boat at the marina and want to know more. And then you also have a similar size someplace over near the village hall or the boathouse, something in that area, to kind of cover both high traffic areas that may not always, people don't always go to both and would see both.
so the same content in two different places. There are
Or
three,
similar content,
okay.
Might
wouldn't
be
have to be
helpful.
exactly the same. Because
Might-
then it could take, the one at the marina could maybe show something maybe a little bit more north, I don't know.
I'm not exactly where we are in the process, but we talked about this a couple times, and I think everybody feels it's a pretty good idea, but the question is now, how do you make it tangible? One thought is maybe there's a storyboard that Historical Society develops that says, look, to Denise's point, there's 2 or 3 bigger ones, then there's smaller ones, maybe there's building ones. How would you map these around the village? And what is the story you tell in each one of these? And the QR code's a really cool idea, or even now they use, is it an NFC chip where you can tap your phone on it and get a video, so the businesses could put a contemporary YouTube ad. After you watch the history, it can tell you what their menu looks like and invite them in.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of, so. I know it's a fine line between coming up with so many ideas, you don't know where to start to where. Or how you just get started, but it seems like there's gotta be some kind of storyboard that says. What does this look like from a starting perspective?
Did you have a list, right, of I think 10 or 12 locations that you started with?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, they
Yeah.
are pretty well scattered. I would
Okay, so
say.
if those were on a map, if those were on a map, are those all locations that you'd want to put in a couple different places? Note in a couple different places along the waterfront, or are some of them, like one of them is Village Hall, is that? Or would Village Hall have its own? That's what we'd wanna think about, I think, I don't know.
I think maybe I heard it wrong, but I thought. You guys were suggesting maybe for start fewer rather than more
Yes,
locations with a little more content in each. Maybe it's only 2,
yes,
one on kind of the north end by the marina, one on the south end by the kayaks, I don't know, but do it in a way where you can add other ones in the future.
yeah, in part for practical reasons, quite honestly. I mean, there's a limitation to
Yeah,
what resources we have
yeah.
to produce this.
Right, and we have to have the space, we've got space, but what's the best place to put them, especially? Where you have to allow space for people to be standing, looking at them. And not in the way of, so you'd have to walk around and take a look and see what that looks like, I don't think that's that hard, but. Okay, and there's a couple different people up here who designed these things, the one in Bailey's was,
Mr. Pyle.
right, and the other one is Heinz.
Julie Hines.
Julie
She has
Hines.
she was a naturalist at Newport State Park years ago.
Yeah,
And then she developed her own company,
Yeah.
Ledge Lake Naturalist. And she does these for national park sites. As well.
Okay.
She's quite professional. She did the ones at Newport. State Park.
Have you thought about engaging with either one of them, if nothing else, to just get ideas to get you started on, okay, from a design perspective, what to do?
Looking at what she's done, it's easy to look at what she's done and what,
Yeah.
what Kristen has done in Bailey's Harbor for,
Uh-huh,
for the look of these things.
Right.
But I think, I can say this, it would be helpful to know that this has a likelihood of going forward before we invest the additional time
mhm.
to create signboards and displays.
So I guess does this committee at this moment have consensus that, or would say to them, yes, proceed and come up with, based on, if there's any other feedback that you would, when we talked about color, we talked about, you have a list, but start small but design it where, other elements could be added to it, or other sites could be added to it, so I think we're in favor of it. Am I
Yeah, I
right?
mean, I think we're directionally aligned. That's how we got the conversation to this
Right.
point, is we're
Mhm.
very interested in it.
Yeah. That
Would
good
the
for
way
you,
to
or-
do this to be, to say, let's get 2 locations and content identified and find out what the budget is so that it can be considered and find out if it's within this
Yeah.
amount that we have available?
Right, I'll continue to work with this historic society. They, like I said, they've come up with content. They know people that can make the signs. We can. They can come up with some designs, what they think that would look like. We'll get the bids. And then, once we have that information, we'll know. Yes, we can afford this, or we need to change our plan a little bit.
That would be
Or
helpful,
find-
I
or
think,
find
to
some
us,
money.
because we don't want to spend our
Well,
wheels creating content for something that's not gonna materialize.
I think to us too, but I think what you said, and again, I want to make sure I got this right. At least in your mind, conceptually, what you're proposing is a little different than what we left with last time. Because it's maybe a
Different
starting,
than the bronze plaque,
and the type of content for it. It'd be a little bigger story
yes.
rather
yes,
than a specific
Yes.
story.
Yes,
And maybe just a couple locations to start.
Then there could be is this for later, but there's locations outside of outside of the waterfront area or downtown that you might be, aside from,
yeah, I mean, Little Sister, for example.
yeah, and
Creating
aside
content
from,
for that, but,
yeah, okay.
That's not gonna get the same kind of foot traffic,
Mhm.
as a sign at the waterfront.
We don't want anybody to know about the sister anyway, that's okay. Okay, so are you good with this? You guys?
I would say good with the idea that we'll work together to see what a cost might be and see whether that cost is doable before we spend a lot of time creating content for it.
Right, I think we just need to know. Like how much content to determine what kind of sign, what size sign.
Yeah.
So we can get those bids.
Yeah, dimensions are important, but the dimensions drive the price anyway, so.
Okay, we'll just, if that's the direction everyone's okay with, we'll just continue to work towards that. Okay.
Could I please have both of your names? I'm sorry.
John Wojcicki,
Okay, can you spell your last name
it's
for me?
LIJEWSKI.
Okay, and Carrie?
Terry Wolf, WLF,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys.
thanks.
See you soon. 5E, wayfinding signage.
So this, as you know, in the packet there, we've had a wayfinding signage program. We had a plan completed. It's been in the budget. We put it in the CIP every year. And this year, the finance committee said, we really don't think we're gonna have the money for this. We keep delaying this. Let's send it to parks to see whether we really want to do this or if we can just remove it from the capital to do the next thing.
Well, my suggestion was, because this is a plan that we paid for quite a few years ago. And people periodically like to talk about plans that we have spent money on and then they sit on a shelf, never to be opened again. I think there is a lot of value in that report and the plan that was created. And so my suggestion as finance chair is that we have removed the money out of, near-term budgets. But that we leave a blank page in the capital improvement plan with no dates and no dollars. So it doesn't get lost. You know, boards turn over. We've had different administrators, different staff. You just don't know, you can't be guaranteed that unless it stays in the CIP with no money and no dates, that if in 5 years or 10 years, somebody wants to go pull it out, that page is still there, it just doesn't have anything on it.
Yeah, that was one of the things that, that survey, I forget by who did mention, wayfinding was difficult within the village.
Yeah.
So, even if we don't have the money for it now, we've paid for the study, it's got the suggestions. Let's make sure it's there, so it's not lost in 10 years from now, somebody's not, we should have wayfinding, let's commission a study.
Okay, so do we have a motion to remove it from, or recommend it be removed from CIP and sending it back to finance? It goes back to finance, I guess.
We've already removed it out of.
Okay, so it was referred to us for discussion?
Wait, I'm a little lost. So Denise, what I heard you explaining is that you wanted, and I thought it was kind of an interesting suggestion, a library of work from committees and the board that was historic, that was there as a reference point. Boards change, stuff gets pushed in and out of the SIP, but when a new board comes in and they revise an old idea, you want a place where you can pull up from this library access to this information and
No,
revitalize it?
The CIP ring binder
Okay,
that we have
Okay.
for the next 5 years. That we keep a page that says wayfinding signage in there.
oh,
Just not put a dollar amount to it.
Literally.
okay, I thought you were talking,
No.
I
No.
thought you're using wayfinding to talk about other projects also.
But we have talked about that for other things that either we have postponed or have removed a dollar amount, but we left the blank page in there that says whatever
Okay.
it is. So that every year, you know, until at a later date or it gets done,
Yeah.
it just kind of stays in the CIP with. It's a way not to lose sight of something that.
Okay, so we have consensus that that's good. Do we need a vote on this?
No, as long as we have consensus. I will say this real quick, I'm sorry. You know, we often wrestle, I remember when I first got here, we wrestled a lot with road signage and street signage. And, you know, I had recommended to staff that you follow the DOT guidelines on that. The parking, you know, just this one about the parking, the P for the parking, we put up so many parking, having everything even start being consistent with this as we put up new signs would help us, I think, have some of that look we were going for with the way, with this plan. So just side note, I guess, if we can start making our signs that we have to put up gradually blend and fix as we replace them, it'd be.
That's a step in the right direction.
Right. So,
Okay.
Okay, so we have consensus on that, everyone? Yes? 5, where are we? Let's see, 5, there we go, 5F, sports complex limitation request to remove, refer for funding approval.
okay, so this is, we're coming through with the lateral, there's a lift station there. You can take it out right now, it's under $12,000. Or you can take it out at a later date, it's gonna cost you much more. Ideally, you just do it now, you're running that lateral literally right by it, the ground is open, take it out. The problem is, how do you pay for that? That's not in a budget, that's not part of, it's not fair that the Parks Building pay for the TKH lift stations. So we are here saying, you know, this lift station is not Megan's property, it's not the property of the utilities department. Years ago, it was put in for the parks, it's parks property. It should come out. Do you want to take it out? And if so, how do we pay for that right now?
Well, I think it's, using this money is a good way to use it, to do it. Only have to dig once. My question is everything pertaining to that lift station removed?
I didn't provide specific plans for the removal, so I don't know if they would remove the electrical or any of that kind of stuff. But the lift station, the way it is, it's a metal can style lift station. So what I think they would do, because they're not gonna excavate a 20-foot metal can out of the ground, I think they're gonna take the pumps out, the rails, all the piping, and they're probably gonna fill it with sand, is what I would assume they're gonna do.
Just the can? but
Yeah,
all
just the can,
piping
but everything
goes.
else would be gone.
Okay.
Yep.
I just
Well,
wanted to make sure that it was as complete as possible.
Well, I think though, from that point going back towards TKH, I mean, they're not gonna go back and dig up and fix those laterals.
They would just abandon that lateral, they would cap it at where it enters the lift station.
So we just need to get some clarification. Cause
Well-
what they do that determines the price, right?
No, they already gave us up their prices, you know.
Oh, they did.
The
Okay.
price, yep. for the-
The problem is they're ready to mobilize out there.
So that
They're
12
like,
grand
do
is
we do
for
this
sure.
or don't
Okay.
we? So,
All right.
Fitzgerald, is that Fitzgerald?
no, it's Great Lakes, which is Levine.
And, is there somewhere where this is documented in case, 50 years from now, somebody wants to build something there? Is there some place where we document where this is? below
Oh,
the
where
grade?
where it was abandoned,
Yeah.
we document all the abandoned utilities.
So Megan has started a program in her division where they're actually mapping all the laterals. We have some of them mapped, but mapping all the laterals.
Yeah.
We ran into this issue, as you know, with the Parks Maintenance Building where we didn't know where, once we found laterals. So they're
Yeah.
making an effort to get everything.
And that's kind of contemporarily compliant with what the DNR wants, so we can move the metal container there.
Yep, it's just gotta be filled and abandoned, inactive, so all the piping has to be just cut off and.
Let me just ask this question. We can't just leave the underground pieces there and just take anything above grade off?
In theory, you technically could, but the lift station is tapped into a force main, and the force main is pressurized, and if you leave the tap there, it could run the risk of
Okay,
failing.
that's a
and
pretty
then
good
you-
answer.
And then you have a sewage
Yeah.
geyser on on.
Yeah, that's a pretty
So,
good answer.
yeah, I would
Yeah.
recommend to remove it all.
Really? Holy cow.
So what's the total that we're gonna get in MRF this year?
It's usually, don't quote me, 35, 38 in that area.
And we haven't allocated any of it yet. This is the first 12 grand.
I think we had talked about some of the historic signage coming out of this one.
That's right. We just discussed that. Okay, nothing else. Okay. Okay, do you want a motion?
Well, do we
Or do
want
we just-
to use the municipal reimbursement funds, make a recommendation to finance for that?
Sure, anywhere. Hold on.
Because like you said, they're ready to go and they're waiting.
It looks like it's important to do it quickly.
There's no restrictions on those funds that we have to use them for anything specific, so we could use them on this.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Was that a motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion to recommend the finance committee.
Okay,
Second.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, next up is 5G multifamily housing and community park proposal in Northwoods and Navajo.
Okay, so this came out of the housing committee made a recommendation to the plan commission discussed it a little bit, and now it's back here, it's actually under the jurisdiction, the property itself is of this committee. So the housing committee said, hey, we have this vacant property at Avon North Hope, we're just sitting on it, we should put it out for bids to get some housing built up there. Presented that idea to the plan commission, and I shared with them my thoughts on how we could get a park out there, is let the developer use that park space to meet his density requirements or the amount of lot area he needs. In turn, he has to put in a park that allows the public to use it. In your packet, you see what I have come up with as a proposal that could be sent out. This does have to go to the plan commission. They did want to see the final wording before this RFP is issued. So just looking for your thoughts on this. Like I said, certainly because the property itself falls under the Parks Property and Streets Committee, you're in charge of what happens with that property. To a certain extent, of course, the board has.
So in this, were these separate properties initially with those white lines? Or what are the white lines?
Those are the property lines right now, yes.
And those 1, 2, 3, 4 parcels that are equal to 2.15 acres?
Correct.
But there's a big hole in the middle of it, right? Is that what
No.
I
Remember
can't
that
remember.
Spring last year where you went
Yeah,
out.
we went,
Yeah.
I thought it was either high or low, I
Well,
thought.
the big hole is right behind 2374.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah, there's
Okay.
a pond out there.
okay,
And what this diagram does is it cuts the pond property in half.
okay,
And you'll see the pond on the far right side of the property.
Okay.
Of the photo.
and again, just for my benefit, because I'm not as familiar, is this, so the idea would be to this is our village property, and we basically are asking for proposals for development of it with, controlled cost housing.
Right, basically the idea would be. You put it out for bids and, the developer gets the land for, I'm gonna say free.
Okay,
They have to develop it with X amount of units. The idea was they would have to be at a certain price point. Those details have to be worked out, yeah.
sure. Is there, so I mean, if they get the land in theory, that helps them reduce their costs so that they can meet whatever requirements we have for this affordability index.
Well, so they meet the density requirements.
Is it density?
Well,
Density, right?
hold on,
I think there's two things, right?
you wanna give them the land so they can have the construction costs low enough so they remain affordable.
That's what I thought, Jerry.
Yeah, then the density side of it is in the R2 zoning, you can only have 6 units per acre. And sometimes we let people exceed that depending on the design, if it looked better, if you had more units, for example, maybe they would increase the density. So there's two things at play there. One is the affordability and then the density.
And what's our desire is for how many units here?
Well, the ordinance would allow 12. That's not a lot for that size property. So the way it's written is, hey, developer, you come up to a plan, you show us a plan which you think would work out here. And we'll let you know whether we're gonna approve that, whether we'll allow you to increase the density, not you, but the plan.
Yeah, I get it.
So it's, because we wanna make sure that they're able to develop it, but keep it affordable.
And how do we guarantee it stays affordable?
We have to do it by the development agreement and deed restrictions when the property is transferred.
Well, but deed restrictions, so we're saying require the units be at or below market rate, and I passed out something to you guys, so if these were rentals or these were for purchase, you can see what the market rate is according to AI at the moment. And it's pretty, when I look at
According
rentals,
to who?
artificial intelligence.
Oh,
So.
this isn't something you got from a real estate agent?
Well,
or
actually, it
anything?
kind of is when I just look, because we don't have that many apartment buildings. And when you go and look at what the rents are, this is exactly what they are.
Okay.
So 3-bedroom apartment, two 3-bedroom apartment, yep, 1,900. That's market rate,
That's
17 to
not
1,900.
workforce housing.
I know it, so what I'm saying is, we're saying owned or rented 1 or 2 bedroom with at least 10% of the units being 3-bedroom, okay? But then we're saying deed restrictions requiring the units to be at or below market rate. So there's very big difference between market rate, below market rate, and affordability. Those are
Yeah.
3 very different buckets.
I would caution not to hone in on that for the developer, because that's where we work that out in the development agreement.
Mhm.
You're gonna have to have X at this price. So when you take it a little further, there's HUD, for example, can break it down by your community.
Yeah.
What that should be.
Well, the median listing home, and these are in what's in the sale of it. So these numbers are really pretty accurate, but I think Denise's point is right. So if they build an apartment building, I don't know who's gonna manage it, but I guess we'll get somebody to manage it.
Well, if they use tax credits, which we'd hope they would,
Yeah,
that's easy because the state monitors all of it, right?
okay,
They, just like the shoals, that gets monitored.
uh-huh,
For us, what we would have is it'd be in the development agreement. And in the deed restriction, by putting in the development agreement, it gives the village, like the code compliance officer, the ability to annually check those rents out there, make sure that they're still following it. Because that market rate is gonna change every year.
yeah. So they is the developer and the person that essentially owns the apartments or manages them, or?
So when we say developer, it's usually the landowner. So if we, for example, let me give you an example, like if Mike had a business, the development agreement would be with the property owner, which is Mike. And then he's referred to as the developer in the village's eyes when we're looking at projects like that.
But since we own the property,
We'd have to transfer it.
okay. So we aren't gonna we're not in the rental business, we're not managing rentals
No.
or anything like that, nor are we in the development business and we're building homes.
Right.
So,
So that would almost be the same as how the Shoals is set up today.
It could be, so we own it, but you know, if you develop it this way, we will give it to you. And we prefer it to be like the Shoals, because when you're using tax credits, but a lot of builders don't wanna work in those programs.
Yeah,
So we wouldn't wanna exclude them, because a lot of good builders don't work in those programs.
but the advantage to us as a village is, to Denise's point, they're regulated by the state to make sure they're in compliance with the,
If they're using,
Inflation.
if they're using tax credits.
okay.
but those are income based, right?
Yes.
You're talking about the
Well,
shows,
they're
those are
income
income
based,
based.
they're not market based.
They're income
And
based.
there's also a problem with that, because there were plenty of local people who could not get into the shoals.
We have employees who cannot get into the Shoals, you know, or you just, people that fall in that crack. that
Right,
little
there's
gray
a,
area.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
You know, there was,
they make
a
too much
local
money.
girl who had, 3 children. Her husband died. And because, they were all under the age of 18 at the time of his unfortunate death, they got SSI, the children did. Well, because of that, they couldn't get
Making
in,
too
but
much
that
money.
should have been saving for their college education
Yeah.
or something, and
Yeah.
not
So
going
the-
against.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great example, but in this case, if it's market based,
Below,
income wouldn't impact it.
that's what I'm asking.
So the.
Right, I think we need to find it for the crack, I'm sorry, I interrupted Julie. I think we need to find that person who is, it looks like good money, you know, but, and it's too much to get into the shoals, but it's not enough to go buy a home or to save money to buy a home.
Yeah, we can better define that in the development agreement, and get very specific on that, and we can have the housing committee work on exactly what that should say. From this committee's perspective, do we agree that this is what village property, which is in your wheelhouse, should be used for, and this, we should be doing an RFP to solicit for housing on that?
I think the housing committee had a really great idea on doing this thing.
Yeah, I don't
Because it
disagree.
gets the park, the village now doesn't have to maintain a park. And
Look at the park bill.
all can, anybody in that area hopefully then can use it the way that it's set up and structured. I think it was a really great idea that came out of that committee.
So do
Plus,
we
it's an
have,
odd piece of land that you might not be able to do much else with.
Yeah, it has a real, that 10-foot slope.
slopes down. Do we have data that tells us, number one, how many 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments we have in the village? And then also tells us what the need is? So we're able to tell this developer in this case, because in here you say with at least 10% of the units being a 3-bedroom. Do we have data that supports that?
That in the housing study?
Yeah, we have that in the housing study and in some other areas that we have. What
Is
we
that
also,
based on what we currently have as well?
well, and what we also know is even your US Census data is showing you the size of the home. We also know in conversations at the housing committee that 3-bedroom, I don't wanna say always, but it's difficult to find people to fill the 3-bedroom rentals.
I don't
And-
disagree.
And they sometimes end up going to 1 or 2 family house or households, 1 or 2 person households. I mean,
Alright,
we
as
don't
long
have to have 10% 3-bedroom. I mean, that's something that we can revisit in the
I just,
future.
you know, we do, I think when you make decisions like this, it needs to be based on data. Hard data. What do we have now? What are we, I
Well,
mean,
10% of 12 is 1.2 units, so.
I'm just using that as an example, because I don't know how many units are gonna end up going there, but I think that making those kinds of decisions, like just helping them to understand what we actually need
Yeah, so we have all that data. We've had the.
from the housing
the
unit study
housing
that
study
Ayers did.
I think,
Stan tax.
you know, I know the committee looked at a lot of that when we were working on that program. They delved into a lot of that, so. Yeah, I mean,
So just, how did we acquire this land? I think we talked about this before, but I can't remember.
yeah, so, well, long story short,
Excuse me.
somebody, I guess the easiest way to say is somebody defaulted on a subdivision and we got the land back.
Okay,
Easy.
okay, so we don't have a lot of cost into it. We wouldn't have a lot of.
I
cost-
wouldn't say that.
Yeah, we had a lot of questions too.
Oh, really?
Well, we lost, yeah, he defaulted on us.
We had each of those small lots across the street. The villages, what the village has in each of those lots is $52,000. So like this corner
Oh,
lot.
okay, so it's not just this irregular parcel we're talking about. You're talking about a default.
That
on
whole
the-
thing.
Much larger.
The subdivision, okay, I'm sorry, I
The
didn't
two that
understand.
We sold to the,
Yeah, like the one that, where there's a
Housing.
Habitat for Humanity home on there now. And
Yeah,
then the
so
others, yeah.
we have $52,000 into each of those. Into 100 by 200 lot, we have $52,000.
So in each of these 4, we have $52,000.
Well, actually a little more because these are bigger than those lots, but yeah, your 2 on Avahoe Court, each of those was.
No, I'm sorry, you're going, I don't know the history of the whole thing.
Yeah.
I was just trying to, here's what I was thinking.
What I was saying.
Yeah.
That we have 52,000 into this one, 52.
Oh, you were saying that.
I was, yeah. And the other ones are a little bigger, so there's more into them.
That'll take a lot of property taxes over a lot of years.
not that one. not that one.
3, well, I'm figuring,
Well,
Well, they've been out there for what?
they've been
7
sitting here,
years?
they've been sitting
8
here a long
years?
Yeah.
time,
10
we're
years?
just losing money on.
is the 52 accumulated? So is that
No.
lost opportunity, that's just cost on the books? Okay. Maybe.
Wasn't there some money set aside for developing these from somewhere? Cause we had done the walk on this site and talked about using the 30-something thousand
Oh,
from
That was
somewhere.
for the park.
That was for the part.
But I thought that money was allocated specifically for that from a non-budget thing. What happens to that money?
Yeah, we'll have to see what they come up with for the park, with the park proposal, I think.
And then when we propose this, the developer will have clear guidelines on how much of it is park and what park means.
So the way it's written, it says they have to come up with a proposal that's satisfactory, and I know when the Plan Commission briefly talked about it, it was, they think they're just gonna put a swing set out there. It's not gonna get approved, you know?
Mhm.
It's in their best interest to actually show a small community park and an attractive development if they want to develop that property by getting the land for free. So it's a way to put the ball in, it's a very creative way to say, we want to have a public-private partnership. But you know, if it doesn't look good, we're not gonna approve this.
It seems like a win-win to get some affordable housing options and develop that space
Right.
in a way that's usable for the community.
Do we go into details or specifics about requiring garages?
No, we do not require.
I know, but would we?
Not at this point, because we're saying what
back
do
to
you
us with what you
propose?
got,
Come
okay.
to us with a proposal.
All right,
The plan commission may say, no, I think you need garages up there, or no, we don't want these garages, or those are ugly garages, or that's the wrong place.
yeah,
No, they control the development of the site.
all right, so do you need a motion or just consensus?
General consensus is fine.
So just so I understand it, I'm trying to get up to speed. So we've got 4 pieces of property here. We would like a development that produces market-based rental rates. Does
At
that
or
be
below.
rentals?
At or below market rate?
Excuse me, below market. I'll even say below market.
Apartments or townhouses.
They can be apartments or townhouses, but they are rentals.
That's what this proposal says, because we need both. This is
Okay,
an area of rentals. I think if you were to use individual homes, you're not gonna get as many properties.
yeah, I'm not
up there.
arguing it. I just wanted to
This
make
says
sure
owned
I
and
understood.
rented.
Yeah. So we put these here. The cost to the village would be whatever we have on the books plus lost opportunity costs for property taxes in the past to give this to somebody who would invest in it. But once they start to make the investment and they own the property, it's no longer a responsibility or a cost. In fact, it should be revenue producing and that there will be property taxes from it.
Correct, and we don't have to develop or maintain that park.
And we get a park out of it. Okay. So that's what we're asking for consensus on.
This says owned or rented, but I guess that's up to plan commission whether these are owned or rented.
Well, we'll see what the developer comes back with, but I think it's gonna be difficult to have ownership out there.
I agree, I just didn't, I just want.
But we don't know what they propose.
They could be if there was a proposal that were all townhomes.
Depending on the price. Okay. Because it's, if they own it, whatever they're gonna pay for it, then they also have to pay, property tax. So it's
So you
that,
pay property tax and rent.
but I mean, true, and they have to have a down payment. Just, I mean, I understand they have to have a deposit, but the different.
So just to correct and just be clear though, for those of you that read this, we will have the cost of having these lots combined and surveyed.
Okay.
Because we're splitting the pond lot. And you have to have that line described in place.
Okay,
So is it okay then if I put in here, it was a consensus that the plan commission and the village board shall be informed that the Parks Committee recommends that the village's housing committee's plan be accepted and authorized staff members to see that the request for proposals from contractors be issued. There's more in there, but is that kind of the gist of it?
I would make it personally, Janelle, I would make it a little more simple because the housing committee, when I presented the idea to them, they're like, yeah, the village needs to do this. They need to issue an RFP. So I don't want to put words in their mouth that aren't there either. I would just say the Parks Committee agreed with the proposal to solicit for bids to develop the property.
Okay.
And then if I understood it right, all the infrastructures there, we have sewer, water, electrical, all to the
Sidewalk.
street, to the curb,
Yeah.
sidewalk, we saw.
but there's no sidewalk
No,
on.
there is no sidewalk?
There's a
There is.
sidewalk on that side of Northwood.
Yeah, not on Nicole, but on Northwoods, yeah.
Megan.
Let me throw one caveat into that. If it's gonna be an apartment style complex, you might need a second service for fire protection. So there might need to be a second lateral installed in case that is what they propose. But,
Thanks.
Digging up the road.
fire protection has to be through a
Brand new
separate
road.
service. Right,
Megan, can it be self-contained,
self-contained.
where they charge a system independent, so they use the primary system to charge a secondary system, so they wouldn't have to put a new lateral in?
Yeah, I suppose that could be an avenue that they could explore.
Okay, 5H, dark sky friendly streetlights.
I was hoping to grab my notes on this and I didn't, but the Plan Commission was researching dark sky friendly regulations. And I had reached out to WPS, this was back in December, I think. And they had agreed to swap out the bulbs on 42 and 57 to make it dark sky friendly lighting. but they needed approval, and I said, well, that would have to come from our Parks Committee. And I'll be honest with you, the agendas have been so full, I just have delayed it. Parks or Plan Commission started talking about it again at their last meeting, where one of their members is gonna research actually crafting some regulations. And so I had mentioned this to him as well, so it is here for your approval or comment or thoughts.
Well, two questions. Are the lumens exactly the same?
Wish I had my notes here.
It seems to
And
be 3,000 or
does it
lower.
have the same cast of area?
I think offhand, I don't think the lumens are, Denise, because I think the lumens, I think they go to. Right now, they're pretty excessive, and I think they drop them down to 2,700.
Good.
Well, that's the
No,
temperature of
that's
the
the,
light.
oh,
Lumens
that's
is
the
the
color
bright.
of the light.
Yeah, the color
lumens is
temperature is
the
3,000 or lower.
Yeah, it ends up being a softer light is, when I had talked to her about it.
I mean, I can't say until I know what we have and
I agree.
what's
And
being proposed,
You know what,
whether it's the
that will,
lumens or the area of cast.
then we'll put it on the next meeting, because I have the list, I have the graph, I have the chart of what every single light bulb is,
okay,
and, where it goes.
Then you have to also make sure that you check that the useful life is the same, otherwise it costs you a lot more.
Do we own these bulbs or are they,
These are WPS. ones.
Oh, so they have to replace it, we don't have to worry about it.
so they would cover all the costs because they're their bulbs.
Right,
They're just asking us for permission,
right,
which we need to understand what they're gonna do before we.
and she sent me all of that data, she did, so.
Alright.
Is that all the streetlights in the village or just,
42 and
just
57.
on 42 and 57?
So have any municipalities, whether they're around us or anywhere else, done this, that I could drive there at night and look at them?
I would have to check on that.
That'd be great to know. In particular, if someone's driving from Ephraim to Sister Bay to. And then things are, I'm wondering if now, I don't know if other municipalities are doing it or not, but if someone's already done it, it'd be great to see it.
So next month's agenda.
Yeah.
Next up, 5I, winter snow removal schedule.
Eric's
Eric, are you
on.
on?
Yep, he's on.
Come on.
So this was put on, Denise had asked this be added just for discussion, so Eric put together a schedule of, what they do on what days. He just handed it to me when we walked in, or I would have made some copies for you, but Eric, do you want to kind of go through the plowing schedule of what you do first thing in the morning, why you do what you do?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so we have 3 separate schedules. We have a weekday schedule and then a Saturday, Sunday schedule. We try to prioritize it as far as EMS being the most priority right there, and then the post office and administration building, and then a library. Anything that's got foot traffic typically will receive attention and priority before any overflow parking lot or any parking structure that really doesn't have a lot of foot traffic in it. And on this list, you can find high priority, and it can even go as far as a high priority plow, shovel and salt, just to make the guys aware, like, hey, when you're going to this location, make sure you're checking these 3 things here. And then on the Saturday and Sunday one, it gets broken up even into even more specific categories, because there are some things that can wait until Monday to go and do. So I really don't want them out and about doing these things, wasting time if it can just wait until Monday. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. We try to hit the high foot traffic spots first, and then everything else, we'll get to throughout the rest of the day.
Well, I think that the administration office, Monday through Friday, should be a top priority when you have 5 or 6 people trying to get in there before 8 o'clock.
That is typically our third location where we go. So we'll usually do EMS, post office, and then the administration building. Being that staff don't get there until 8 o'clock, and I'm trying to get the PO boxes available for our residents at the post office first. And then, of course, EMS is always at the top of the list to get the ambulances out to Mill Road.
Well, if the snow is really bad, most people, we get a lot of snow, most people don't even have their driveway necessarily plowed out yet to go and get their mail. But staff is almost always showing up. So I don't know what we change, but it has to change.
Eric,
We could definitely move administration before post office.
Eric, do you have to have area open for the post office deliveries from kind of post office distribution?
Yeah, we handle the snow removal for the post office. So yeah, we would try to get there before the delivery truck does and to open up that area for them as well.
Does that truck come at the same time every day or not?
Roughly around the same time. It's usually around like 7:15, 7:20.
So Eric, it would be a hardship, it sounds like it wouldn't be a hardship to just flip, the admin building with the post office and do that second after after the fire station, right?
It definitely wouldn't be, but you know, if it's not like one of those storms that are going to keep people at home, that would be my concern. Because then people are out and about checking stuff. And, you know, it's kind of a rock and a hard place of where do we want to be in using our resources? You know, when I'm thinking of it, you know,
That's where we want to be.
the PO boxes are open before the administration. We don't typically get those huge storms. Those aren't the norm that are going to keep people at home. Most people have a routine, they stick to that routine, you know, come, you know, heck or high water, they're going to go get their mail. I mean, they go get their pancakes at Al's, they're always blocking me in their
The
gutter.
village is requiring staff to come in, and if staff has to be in by 8, and we require them to come in, and it's not cleared, that seems like we'd open ourselves to some sort of liability even. Seems like they should be a priority.
Right, I just want to hear how we're gonna get it done.
So Eric, I wonder if, maybe this isn't an impossibility, but if, you know, like someone could start on the admin building while another group is doing some work over it, and maybe that's just not a possibility. Yeah, another group is doing, not, you have a large group, but somebody else is doing something at the post office, just to make sure that the walkway, which can be treacherous because there's stairs or, you know, there's a bit of an incline, is accessible.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely, I could just very easily make the change to administration gets done before post office. That's not a big deal.
Okay,
Go.
we're good. Okay. Next up is 5J, Parks and Streets Department staffing.
Okay, there's two things involved with this. One is we had earlier talked about not filling the vacant parks maintenance technician position. And then we had talked about, well, maybe
That's not delaying the snow plowing, is it?
we talked about contracting somebody for snow removal. We're back to Eric's recommendation is, let's try it a year. Let's not fill it. Let's give them a bump in salary, in this trial period,
I
see if
thought we
it
talked
works.
about a bonus. Like I thought we discussed this in depth, and it was a trial period with a bonus for the extra hours, and what changed.
And then we came back and reported that one of his guys was concerned, and
Right,
so we
we
had
didn't
talked
wanna do it.
about perhaps maybe contracting for snow removal, so you wouldn't have to work 20 hours. And then they just said, you don't get enough snow that it shouldn't be that big of a, issue. Let's go back to that original proposal. If you're still okay with it, we'll move it forward to personnel. The second part of this has to do with Janelle. For those of you that don't know, Janelle has announced her retirement. This week is her last week with us. So 19 years committed to the village. Thank you, Janelle.
Thank you.
And we were talking about how to refill that position and, you know, there's a lot of moving pieces on this. You know, since I've been here, I write my own development agreements, I write my own ordinances. So there's not as much for that position to do as they have done in the past. And trying to look and figure out what's the best way to structure that, her replacement position. Should that be 50% general administration and 50% parks? Because every department, let me back up, like in Megan, she has Kara who helps with the agendas, minutes, staff reports, or things she might need help with. In Marina, you have the assistant marina manager. You don't have that in parks. And so what you have is Erica's doing a lot. Heidi is doing a lot of those parks things. You know, Heidi's doing village hall reservations, memorial bench programs. I'm doing a lot of park stuff. And would it be better to take that Janelle's current position and make it 50-50, where 50% is dedicated towards the parks program, parks department, and then the other 50 is general administration, government services.
And do you think that the 50-50 split is really reasonable, that there is, with everything that everybody's doing, and even though it's scattered, that it is going to take up 20 hours a week?
I do, because if you look at what's really going on in the parks, so you have what committees really are run through the Parks Department. Well, that would be your Parks Property Streets Committee. It should be your Village Hall Planning Task Force, because that's in one of your properties, right? You have, mine's blank right now, several of them that should be running through that that department. And then there's also, you know, the staff reports for this, the follow-up, the minutes. I do believe that it could be 50-50, because Heidi has said that, you know, with what she's doing too, would go over there. Now, Janelle hasn't been able to help with that, because what Janelle has been doing is, for those of you that aren't aware, she also went through and our entire municipal code, she reformatted the entire thing and stuff like that. But now that those bigger projects are winding down or are done, there is the time, I think, to pick up more to help the Parks Department.
Retyped every single word, right?
Well, I think the other thing too with Heidi, because Heidi, in terms of, to your point, redistributing workload, the time it takes for booking the pavilion, booking pickleball, booking the tennis courts, booking Village Hall, booking that kind of, you know, there's a lot of, it's not hard. I'm not suggesting but there's a lot of moving parts and there are human beings involved.
Yeah.
Which can make things interesting.
Well,
you know,
to be honest, sorry for interrupting.
Sure,
but
go ahead.
I used to do that,
Mhm.
and I would do the memorial benches and I would do all that stuff. But then when duties were changed a little bit, when Christy was there, that was some stuff that she could handle.
So there were some changes made as a result, but the answer, I think it is a little bit from what my conversations with Heidi and my conversations with Janelle in terms of, because in season, and you know, even now, well, not even in season actually, because people start booking out pretty far, right? For, you know, when they want to use certain, and waterfront park, marina park, whatever it might be. It just takes a lot of time. You're on the phone, somebody calls, you call them back, they missed you. There's a lot of
their reservation.
Well, it's a lot.
And they change.
It's a lot of stuff. And
Well, that was, So I guess I'm glad to hear that because that was my first question on my page. Will this alleviate some of Heidi's responsibilities?
Yeah.
And then my second question is, what is the new job description recommendation from personnel? So I went on to your last couple of meetings.
We're gonna talk about that Thursday, if you can zoom in, because, sorry, it's tomorrow. God.
Tomorrow first.
Tomorrow at 4. Because I worked with Julie on sort of I spoke with Janelle as well. This is what I did, then this is what I did, right? So that's what this job description looks like now. Julie was helpful and said, okay, maybe now it looks like that, so.
Okay,
And
so
that-
because
that's
there
in-
was the original in tomorrow's packet, it showed the original and then the fact changes
Yep.
one right after that.
Right.
And then the one with the making it 50-50 was completed on Saturday, so that one's not in the packet.
Right, and that helps us to put, to understand and put a search out there, put a job spec out there. So everybody knows exactly what they're
So
doing.
I'm,
But it also, just real quickly, it does affect other things though, because when you look for an administrator, you have to make sure that you're finding one that knows some of the, legal things and zoning, because if they're writing their own codes and contracts and things like that, so it gives you a more clear direction on where you want to go, I think, with your administrator as well.
Meaning if we don't have an administrative assistant, or I'm
Well,
using the wrong word, but if
so-
that's what Janelle did in a previous life,
Yeah, Janelle used to, with the past administrators we had, Janelle was writing all the ordinances, all the development agreements. So she was doing a lot of that.
because they didn't know what they were doing.
Correct. Well, I don't know, I wasn't.
Yeah, I'm saying that as a
But-
fact, they did not know what they
Right.
were doing.
So, but when I came, I did that, so then I kind of redirected it and said, hey, Janelle, how about if you focus on rewriting all these codes, because there's a lot of issues with the municipal code. We found, the example I always use is we talk about what you're gonna do by the railroad track. Well, we don't have railroad tracks, so, so Janelle has spent the last 2 years going through those codes, reformatting, looking for things, and she's still catching things every now and then. So, so it's, she's been busy taking care of stuff that people don't see as, because it's not out there,
Right.
it's something you're doing on the web.
Mhm.
But, and then a lot of that stuff ended up getting transferred to Heidi too, or Heidi would just pick up. So let's put it back. Let's make it, your clerk is by statute is supposed to be doing X, Y, Z. Let's make it back to that. Let's make sure your administrators know what they're doing when you're hiring them. And then let's make sure your administrative assistant is,
That stopgap
right.
from you. Just an FYI for tomorrow's meeting. He, she,
She,
Oh, yes,
thank
Right.
you.
yeah.
I'm not sure what that means.
I think I did catch that on the one I worked on Saturday. But all of our old job descriptions, all of our old ordinances always say he, she, so. that's
Instead of
another thing.
they, or it could be the applicant or whatever.
I'm pretty sure I caught that on the one that was emailed to the committee on Saturday.
Okay, well,
I hope I did.
that's why I'm bringing it up now.
So I'm just curious, listening to this discussion, is this something that typically would come to the Parks Committee, or would this typically go to the Personnel Committee? I mean, I would have assumed that you would have had the flexibility to kind of, within state statutes, organize your staff the way you want to organize it. I'm just curious.
Just
Yeah,
more of a budgeting thing too.
Yeah, in Sister Bay, the admin doesn't have that flexibility to work with their staff. It goes through a committee. And then because it is involving a Parks Department in their budget, we go to Parks and say, hey,
Okay.
do we even want a half-time admin person? Because we're not just gonna have one committee approve it and then the Parks Committee is like, we don't support that idea. So we try to work together on all of them, even if it means going to several different committees.
And Eric's up to speed, or if he's not, Eric, if you have questions, certainly, if you're still on, speak up.
Yeah, I'm still on. No, I don't have any questions at this time, Louise. Me and Julie have discussed this prior to this meeting. Yeah, I'm definitely on board for splitting, you know, the duties between the assistant administrator and helping out the parks department as well.
Right.
So then there's just one contact person.
There's one contact person you called, but that, correct.
So there is more efficiency with that and streamlining.
Right.
So is it
And
the
let's-
consensus that the 50-50 is preferred?
Consensus, yes,
Okay,
meaning in terms of the
Yeah.
role that we are
Yeah.
going to fill.
Yeah.
In terms of what their job would be 50% in terms of their hours.
Yeah.
You know, just their workload, 50% in general administrative work for the village, and then for the parks, property and streets.
okay.
Right, thanks, Jim. Up next, we have, looks like staff reports. Number 6, beg your pardon, number 6. Do you have any questions on the report from Eric? Eric, I had one quick thing that I thought we might want to add to the volunteer day. When I was down looking at where, they were thinking about putting the e-bikes. And I mean, you know, I'm happy to do the pickup here if nobody else wants to do it, but I don't know how many volunteers we need to get this project completed in 4 hours. But when you walk along the beach, along the walkway there, you know, and there all the tall grass, it hasn't really come up yet. There's bungee cords, there's plastic glass, you know, all that stuff miraculous comes up in the spring with the flowers. So I mean, it's a good time to be able to pick that out. And
Absolutely.
I'm happy to be assigned to walk over, you know, to walk down and do that. I walked back and forth a couple of times, and it's, you know, pretty consistent, not unusual. Beach looks great, but it just no one would have seen it because all that stuff died and it's flat now, so you can see everything that's just laying in there. It's an easy time to get it. My other question would be, how are we gonna let people know that where to go and when to do this?
So we're gonna, work on a poster. I was,
Right.
if this was approved, or if we were all okay with the date and time we have, I was gonna see if Lisa would help from Green here, because she makes a lot of the posters. She does a lot of the graphic art.
Right.
And then start, circulating that and getting a press release out,
Okay.
getting it on the radio.
So April 26th from 8 to noon. So we're gonna tell them all to meet in a certain place and then
Right.
assign them off to go off. to
Yeah,
different
we
things?
thought
Okay.
up at Gateway, and
Yeah.
Eric would have water and granola there and garbage bags, and
Okay.
the SBA offered to give us, I think it was a dozen vests.
Yeah.
12 vests.
Great.
Eric has
What
gloves.
date is it again?
The April 26th from 8 to noon.
I can't be there at work. Which,
I'll be there.
you know,
That's not a problem, but
we might want to consider
That's a Saturday.
to say,
how many people work the weekends.
It's gonna be a very busy weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be working. Like, I'd love to participate.
You know, that we might want to consider, you know, sometime doing something during the week. For,
We can change the day.
I'm not saying that we have to, but I'm just saying that, you know,
Something to
maybe sometime in the
consider.
future,
Yeah,
it's a Friday and a Saturday. I don't know, maybe how much more flexible that might be, or it's a Wednesday and a Saturday or
or like a Sunday or Monday. I feel like Sunday is more of a down.
Yes.
day for
absolutely.
families. To like, you can get more families participating on a Sunday rather than a Saturday.
Yeah. If you guys are okay, I think we should see how it goes this year. And
No, that's fine, that's fine.
Because one of the questions we have is, do we really have enough garbage for them to pick up, you know?
you'd be surprised.
So, yeah, and I think there's areas you're gonna find a lot.
But I think that there's more that we can do than pick up trash. Julie.
I agree with you 100%. We had talked about trash for this one, but you know, we know that by Gateway, we need flowers pulled, we know we need stuff planted. We've talked about this done by the other beds.
That's more of a June.
It is, and we need weeding in July and August. So, I mean, that takes time, a lot of time, especially up at Gateway.
So I think we just see how it goes, see what type of response we get. If people are engaged, let's keep working on it.
Well, we have a good, I agree, and then we have, it's a starting place, right? And then that can lead to maybe another scheduled event. Okay, we did this and this is what happened. Here's the next scheduled one. Here's the activity. This is where everybody's got some notice and, maybe that's the way to do it.
I would like to ask the committee if they concur with me or not. Eric wrote in here that all the Christmas decorations have been taken down, the ones that needed to be repaired are repaired. And I was surprised that sad snowman in front of the village hall was out there again this year. He looks terrible during the day. He's not white anymore. He's a light brown. At night, it looks okay. But did anybody else notice how pitiful that snowman is? And can we
Well,
not
nobody told him to throw it out.
put him out next year? That's what I'm asking. Do I have concurrence from this committee?
We're waiting to hear what the holiday lighting task force does.
Let's see what they say.
It makes us look pretty bad.
I think Eric, if you're on, is it consensus of the committee just to stop using that snowman?
Just to confirm, Denise, you're talking and referring to the Frosty, the snowman that's by the village hall, that's in the flower beds?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, yeah, or I could look for a replacement for him, that's not an issue.
Oh, don't replace him. Get rid of it.
Just get rid of him because there's a committee that's gonna work on decorations.
Well.
Yeah, we don't have to put him out next year, that's fine.
Haven't because of the money situation. So I know they extended it now a year, but I don't want to deal being chair of the holiday lighting committee and coming up with a plan that everybody will bitch about because we don't have the money.
Well,
So-
everybody's gonna complain about whatever the decorations are, because that's what everybody complains about. You never wanna be on a decorating committee. But,
There's money budgeted for.
Sounds like my family complaining about the way I decorate.
Oh, nobody's ever happy, never be on that committee, but don't ever be on landscaping either. And here we are. That's what we do.
Committee here.
Yeah. Hey, Eric, I have a quick question as long as we're talking about the decorations and stuff. There are some that didn't fit into the barn out on Loggerquist. And I get a lot of people asking me like, they're not thrilled that they're sitting outside out there. Is that because we're just waiting to move? There's nowhere else to put those?
That is correct. We're waiting for the cold storage building to open back up for us. Right now, Alliance has a lot of our building materials in there. So as soon as that building becomes available, all that outside stuff from the barn is going to be heading inside there.
I give an answer. Great. Okay. Thank you.
And
Yep.
then Lee, on your administrator's report.
Yeah.
Can you even try to explain to me about the Brooks Act, for God's sakes?
Yes, I actually have 3 things I want to talk about on this one too. Yeah, let me go back to this here in my mind here. Where was I at on here? The Brooks Act is under the 57 one, right?
Yes, second paragraph.
So with the Brooks Act, because we are getting federal dollars for the project, it has to be based on the quality and not the cost of the project. So it's really odd for us to do this. I don't like it, but this is how the DOT requires it. So when we are looking at the construction services, part of the Highway 57 trail, which is covered by the grant, we cannot look at the price whatsoever. Because the Brooks Act requires, it has to be a fair decision, not based on price.
And so then what if you hire someone and we don't have that money?
Yeah, I don't like it. At some point, so after you make that decision and you see the contract, then you know what price you're getting into. I'll be honest with you.
But you have to make the decision before you know the price. And if only one person bids, they could charge us whatever. because
That's
we
my,
see the price.
that's my concern. The I've never worked on a project that was affected by the Brooks Act. So the DOT is helping me through this project. When we get them back, I sit down with her and she goes through, because there's some where they will say, no, we will not. We won't release those funds if you use this person or this company. They have to approve the company that you actually, they have to approve the contract. And I believe at that time is when we find out what it is, because clearly you have to make sure it doesn't exceed your grant. It's I've never done it that way. It's new to me.
Had never heard of it before.
Yeah,
But we don't really have a choice, right?
not on the construction side of it. Yep. Okay, so I did want to make some comments real quick on my administrator's report, unless there was another question real quick. Okay, on the triangle project, I just wanted to make a note. I have talked to Jennifer, the engineer, about the drainage issues, especially the one down by the parking lot,
Yeah.
where it just drains right back into the man's basement. He pumps it out under the road, drains right back in. They are aware of that. They have spent previously spent some time looking at some of the drainage out there, but they are aware of that and will. I'm hoping with this project, this one actually has public meetings and public input so they can know about the project. It's just gonna make it smoother when we go to actually implement the project. Village Hall renovation additions, I just wanted to clarify that 10 million CDBG is, hold on, that's it's 10 million for CDBG Public Facilities Program, the non-entitled communities, so the small ones. There's still that bigger pot that Milwaukee and those areas get. Nina, I think, is an entitlement community, but that 10 million is just for the smaller ones, or the non-entitled. And it's just for the public facilities program. I talked with Cindy and she said, yeah, it's 10 million. She said they usually end up spending awarding a little more than that. So I think what they do is if there's money left over in another program, they must, if they feel it's a really good program, they must allocate it or award it, but we'll see. I'm not very confident on this application, as you know. We just got eligible. The plans for that village hall aren't to the point where they should be for this application, but we're gonna try anyway. Ice rink agreement, just real quick, the Friends of the Ice Rink had wanted to break ground on the new ice rink in May. And I explained to them that wasn't possible because the unit of government, we can no longer design and build at the same time. You have to do bids for design, you have to come back, you have to do design. So that's when I had said, you know, the only way I know to make this happen is if you lease the property, because then you're not, as a nonprofit, you're not bound by the same rules we are, and they would be able to get by with using a design build firm. So that's why they're gonna come back and talk to us about that lease, so. I don't think they'll be able to break ground in May like they wanted. I think it'll just be a couple months later, but it would still be quicker than going through the process government has to go through. That's all I have.
Anybody else? Okay, matters for a future agenda. That you refer to in committee.
We do have our walking tour.
Yep. We want to get a date for that now.
Well, we could do it on May 5th. I think we did that last year where we met, and then walked through. You know, I think, some of the things we want to talk about on that walking tour is the Geithner bike shed.
Yep.
We need to talk about March Grutzmacher's little library.
Okay.
Well, we already agreed on where it would go.
We did? Okay.
No, I went back, no, we kept.
Or was that a
talking.
plan commission?
That was
it,
plan commission,
Oh,
then it
okay.
came back here. I'll be honest with you, I'm like, you guys, I'm gonna make the decision.
Mark told us to figure it out. She doesn't want to pick a place.
Well, plan commission chose by hers and Ron's bench.
And then he
Go.
came back here. So
It did?
I think yeah, I'd have to look back and
I
see
don't
what
remember
happened
being
after
asked
that.
that
I
question.
think, I thought we agreed to it, but I said Marge deserves something much more colorful. And so we have to look back at the designs that you had presented from the research you had done.
Yeah, that's what I remember, but it's as far as where it would
We,
go.
that hasn't come to parks.
No.
Okay, then it was only plan commission that we talked about it.
So we should finish that. You know, one thing we should talk about too is in the finance committee had allocated money for trees for the Lagerquist property. And that came out of the last year's municipal reimbursement funds. That money is sitting there. We need to pick out the trees, design and get it installed. Spring is coming. Now's the time to do it. So I don't know, we had talked about different things. I personally think we should have either staff can do it, or you pay a firm to design it. You're burning up a lot of your money on the design though. And I know we had talked about hardwoods and the mixture, at this committee. I think we did. But if you're gonna plant it along ZZ on Lagerquist, you should have some openings in there. So I think there's a little more work to do on that. But I think that needs to get squared away because we do have to get those trees in the ground pretty quick. So we should talk about that too in May. Okay.
Anything else, guys? Maybe on the walk around, we can look at where might be a good location for those historical markers, but
Yeah,
the Historical Society, I'm sure, has ideas. Okay.
good idea.
Okay, looks like we are now going to move into executive session, so we are correct? Okay. So we will now consider a motion to convene into executive session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85 to confer with legal counsel who will either orally or in writing will advise the village board on strategy to be adopted with respect to current or likely litigation broadband contract. Do I have a motion to convene into, can we take a vote? Is that what it is?
You need a motion.
Do you have a motion to move into executive session, please?
So.
All in favor? Aye.
You have to take a roll.
Roll call vote, please.
Bertle,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Orozco.
Yeah.
Aaron's
Yes.
and Laskowitz.
Yes.
Megan, will you get a hold of Great Lakes then and tell them to go, well, we have to go to finance yet, but
Yeah, well, and I don't know, honestly, because they already ordered all their parts and stuff,